It had been 3 months, not since the betrayal, because that ran deeper than time, but 3 months since she stood in the center of Tunde's dim apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of two bodies that had known too much of each other, and told him, in a voice sharpened by survival, "If you ever come near me again, directly or indirectly, I won't just destroy you, I'll erase you." And then she left, and she meant it. There had been no messages, no calls. Tunde went silent, like he was vanishing, like even he knew her words weren't a threat. They were law. And Kofi? She hadn't seen him. Not since that night. Not since she watched everything she thought she'd built collapse under the weight of his lies and his body in a bed that was meant for their future. Occasionally someone would mention him in passing. They said he was keeping a low profile. They said he was trying to rebuild his image. But to Fatou, Kofi was a name she no longer said out loud, a closed book she'd stopped reaching for. His silence wasn't peace, it was absence, and that, she'd learned, was its own kind of closure. The house she once shared with Kofi had been sold 2 months after the fallout. Too many echoes lived in those walls, too many lies soaked into the floors. She didn't fight for it, didn't want it, let the ghosts haunt someone else. Her new apartment was smaller, quieter, and most importantly, hers. Every corner was empty of his shadow. It was the kind of place that made silence feel safe. A second-floor walk-up with sunlight in the morning and a view of the street that reminded her she was still part of the world. The walls were bare, but not cold. She was still filling it in, still figuring out what kind of woman lived here now. Most days began the same way: tea, music, silence, and therapy. Fatou had been going every Tuesday at 10 a.m. A clean white room, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s who spoke softly but cut to the truth like a scalpel. They talked about grief, about rage, about the weight of being seen and betrayed in the same breath. Sometimes Fatou left those sessions shaky and raw, like her skin had been peeled back. Sometimes she felt nothing at all, but every week she showed up. Because healing, she was learning, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just choosing to sit in your own silence without flinching. And she was learning, slowly, how to hold a boundary without apologizing, how to stop rereading old texts like they held new answers, how to be whole, or at least how to want to be. And if some night still came with memories that scratched beneath her ribs, well, that was part of the price. She was building again, this time from within, until now. The knock came just after 6 p.m. when the golden light was sliding off her balcony railing, and the last of her laundry had finished drying on the line. The smell of roasted cumin and thyme still lingered in the kitchen from the stew she had abandoned on the stove. The knock was soft, almost polite. She stayed still. Another knock. Fatou rose from the couch, pulled her hoodie sleeves past her wrists, and crossed the room with the poise of someone who's been training for this exact moment without ever knowing she'd need it. She didn't have to look. Her bones already knew, but she looked anyway. And there he was, Tunde, standing there like the chapter she swore she had burned, his face slightly thinner, his eyes heavier. He didn't flinch when her gaze met his through the peephole. He just waited. Fatou didn't open the door. She watched him for a full 30 seconds, measured her own breath. She thought of her therapist's words: "You're allowed to protect your peace, even from what once felt like home." She pressed her palm flat against the door, not to open it, but to feel its weight, to remind herself that it was a boundary now, not a barrier. She let him knock again, once, then silence. She turned away. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She walked back to the couch, picked up her phone and hit record. "He came to the door today," she said aloud. Her voice was steady. Her throat was not. "I didn't open it, and I won't." She ended the recording and sent it to her therapist. From her window, she could see the shape of him retreating. Slow steps, shoulders slouched but not defeated, like a man who had more patience than pride, the kind of man who'd wait. Fatou watched until he disappeared into the night, and still she didn't exhale. Fatou didn't sleep that night. She lay on her back in the middle of her small bed, the ceiling fan humming quietly above, trying its best to cool the fire burning under her skin. The knock had come and gone, and so had Tunde, but the residue of him lingered like steam, coating her thoughts, clinging to the walls of her apartment like smoke that refused to lift. She'd gone to therapy the next morning, walked in wearing her all black like armor. Her therapist simply said, "You didn't open the door. That matters." Fatou nodded, but she didn't tell her that part of her had wanted to. Not because she missed him, but because she wanted to see if she still had the power to look him in the face and not flinch. That's how it began, but it continued, a message. Simple, unassuming. "I hope your new place feels like peace." She didn't reply. Another 2 days. "If you ever feel like talking, I'll meet you anywhere. No expectations." Still, she said nothing, but she read it 3 times, and she didn't delete it. Tunde knew how to speak in silence. He always had. By week's end, the heat had grown thicker, not from the weather, but from the quiet pull she couldn't shake. She found herself brushing her hair more carefully, even though no one was watching, spraying her favorite oil on her pillowcases, vanilla and cedarwood, like it could keep the past from creeping under her sheets. That afternoon she sent one message, no greeting, no softness, just say what you came to say. The typing bubble started within seconds, then disappeared, reappeared. "Not like this," he finally wrote. "Let me say it in person. 1 hour, public, no tricks, against everything." She agreed. Fatou arrived at the cafe 10 minutes late, on purpose. The late afternoon sun was low and golden, casting soft, syrupy light across the sidewalk and through the wide cafe windows. The small courtyard out front smelled of fresh mint and burning charcoal from a nearby food stall. Wind rustled through the leaves of the tree above, and its branches creaked softly like an old secret trying to speak. Her sandals clicked against the stone path as she stepped through the small iron gate. Her palms were slightly damp, her breath measured. She wore high-waisted dark jeans and a sleeveless cream-rib top that hugged her form without asking permission. Her gold hoop earrings glinted against her skin every time she turned her head. No makeup, her face bare and stunning. Her hair had grown out since he'd seen her last, a soft dark halo that framed her like a crown. And there he was. Tunde sat at a small table near the wall. When he saw her, he stood. His body moved before his face caught up. Because his face looked like someone who'd just been hit in the chest, like breath had become a foreign thing and her presence had emptied the room of oxygen. His eyes, hazel brown, darker than she remembered, locked on her as if afraid she might vanish again. He was dressed in a white long-sleeve shirt rolled to the elbows and black trousers that hugged his lean frame. His cornrows were neater than they had any right to be, and the gold earring in his right ear caught the sunlight as he shifted. The air around him seemed heavier, as if he carried the entire weight of what had passed between them on his shoulders, and it was starting to show in his posture. They didn't speak, not at first. She took the seat across from him, slowly, like stepping into cold water, and placed her small woven bag on her lap, her spine perfectly straight. The air between them was thick with things unsaid. The server came quietly, setting down a glass of chilled hibiscus for her, already sweating with condensation. His drink, something darker, remained untouched beside him. Fatou didn't look at the menu, didn't smile, didn't blink more than necessary. She was composed, but her senses were on fire. She could smell the musk of his cologne, earthy, warm, with a hint of citrus. something familiar, something designed to bring memory back uninvited. She could see the tension in his hands, knuckles pale where he clutched the edge of the table. She could feel the burn of his gaze on her collarbone, the pulse in her neck, the space between her lips when she exhaled a little too hard. Tunde's voice, when it finally came, was low and textured, like it had been cracked open and barely sealed back together. "I don't want forgiveness." It wasn't a greeting. It was a confession. Fatou tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing, not in confusion but precision. "Then why are you here?" He looked at her like he was seeing the after-image of the woman he'd once known. Only now the light was different. She was sharper, brighter, harder to touch. His jaw twitched before he spoke again. "Because forgetting you isn't working either." The words fell between them like a knife and a flower at once, beautiful, wounding. Fatou's throat tightened. She reached for her tea, though she had no intention of drinking it. The glass was cool against her fingers, a contrast to the heat that crept up the back of her neck. Her skin, usually unreadable, betrayed her now, goosebumps rising along her arms like the past had come back and whispered against it. She looked at him again, slower this time, really looked. Tunde's eyes searched her face with the kind of hunger you only get when someone has starved themselves of memory. But there was remorse in them too, real, aching, raw, and that was what scared her most. She wanted to believe he was still the same. She wanted to believe she wasn't. Still, she didn't move, and he didn't stop looking. Fatou blinked once, twice. The air between them thickened, like heat rising off pavement just after the rain. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The background noise of the cafe dimmed in her ears. The clatter of cups, the low murmur of conversation, the faint jazz humming through the speakers. It all blurred beneath the pounding of her own heart. Tunde didn't take his eyes off her. Not once. She shifted in her seat. "You don't get to say that," she said quietly, but the edge in her voice betrayed the calm she was trying to hold on to. "Not after what you did." "I know," he whispered, but he didn't look away. The intensity of his gaze made her feel like she was being peeled open, layer by layer. It wasn't love, it wasn't lust, it was something far more dangerous, familiarity. He still knew how to find her softest parts. She sat back, her hand curling around the handle of her cup like it might anchor her to the table. He leaned forward slightly, the sunlight catching the edge of his jaw. "I didn't come here expecting anything. I just needed to see you, even if it was just once." Her stomach turned. This was why she shouldn't have come. This was why silence was safer. Because Tunde was no longer her storm. He was the smoke, the kind you don't see until it's already in your lungs. She stood suddenly, too fast. The chair scraped back, sharp against the tile floor. Tunde straightened. "Fatou, I shouldn't have come." Her voice cracked, low but final. She didn't meet his eyes, not again, not when hers were already burning. She grabbed her bag, fingers fumbling slightly as she adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Then she turned and walked out, into the wind, into the noise, into the street, and didn't look back. This was not a beginning, but it wasn't an ending either. It was the space between the inhale and the scream. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. Tunde had watched her walk away with that same quiet desperation men wear when they realize too late that the one they lost now moves with her own gravity. She didn't look back, but she felt it. That tether, that ache. It followed her home, curling beneath her skin like a splinter. Her apartment was quiet when she entered. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and wax from the candle she forgot to blow out. Everything was in its place. Folded throws on the couch, her journal stacked neatly on the desk, framed poetry quotes lining the hallway. It was the kind of space that made her feel safe, unseen, and unbothered. But not tonight. Tonight, the stillness felt like a dare. Fatou showered in silence, letting the water bead down her spine and soak into her thoughts. She scrubbed her skin until it tingled, like she was trying to wash off the way Tunde had looked at her. Like she could rinse away the memory of his voice, his posture, the glassy plea behind his eyes. "Because forgetting you isn't working either." The words echoed against the tile and the space between her ribs. She wrapped herself in a deep burgundy robe, one she bought just after the fallout, when she swore she would never let another man near her skin without earning it. She padded barefoot through the apartment, made tea she wouldn't drink, and sat by the window watching the night bloom across the city. Then came the text from Tunde. "Didn't expect to see you. Didn't know I still knew how to breathe around you." Her fingers hovered over her screen. She told herself she wouldn't respond. She owed him nothing. But somewhere between the steam of her tea and the tight pull in her chest, she typed something back. "That was never the problem. It was everything you did when you could still breathe." She didn't expect a reply. She got one anyway. She read it slowly. "Come by, no talking, just honesty." It was reckless, stupid, dangerous, but by midnight she was standing at his door. The elevator ride had felt like a slow descent into a choice she couldn't pull herself back from, her pulse too loud. The hallway smelled like bleach and late-night silence. She stood outside his door for 10 seconds that felt like 10 lifetimes. When he opened it, he didn't speak. Neither did she. His apartment was dim, lit only by a single lamp and the ambient glow of a record player spinning something low and smooth in the corner. Jazz. Always jazz. The kind that carried too many memories. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but it sounded final. Like a lock sealing a choice she couldn't undo. Tunde said nothing. He didn't move, and neither did she, not right away. Fatou stood inside his apartment like she was stepping onto thin ice, her back turned away from him, her senses turned up to unbearable volume. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the shuffle of his bare feet on the hardwood, the faint scent of sandalwood and something sweet, like vanilla or maybe bourbon, lingering in the air. It made her dizzy, made her hate how familiar it all still felt. She unclenched her fists. Her coat stayed on. Tunde stood just behind her, a few feet away, arms crossed but his body taut with the energy of something waiting to combust. He looked like he hadn't slept, but still managed to wear that unsettling quietness of a man who always thought he was in control, even when he wasn't. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. She felt him before she saw him, warmth creeping up her back, his breath barely touching the air near her ear. "You came." Fatou turned finally, her eyes burning holes through his chest. Yes, she came. No, she didn't know why. Maybe she'd regret it. "This means nothing," she said flatly, but her voice trembled. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his hand, just slightly, like he might touch her cheek, but stopped, hovered, waited. His fingers curled inward like he knew one wrong move would undo her completely. And maybe that was the point. She reached for his wrist and moved his hand to her face herself. "You don't get to pretend this is sacred," she whispered. His touch was gentle, like he was trying to memorize the curves he'd once taken for granted. Her skin heated beneath his palm. Her heartbeat climbed into her throat. She hated that she still remembered the map of his body, that she could still predict the way his breath would hitch when she looked at him like this, that her body didn't flinch, it leaned. The kiss came fast, not soft, not slow. It crashed between them like waves on stone, filled with the ache of too much silence. His mouth was hot, urgent, tasting like apology, and something darker, something she couldn't name. The room flickered. Candlelight, lamplight, shadow. Music played on, jazz wrapping around them like smoke. Her coat came off, his lips found the hollow of her collarbone, and she gasped. She should have stopped. She should have said no. She should have remembered the way this always ended. But the truth was, she missed being wanted, and Tunde had always known how to want her with his whole body. And now he did again. Their bodies collided like truth and denial, like fire and gasoline. The tension didn't break. It bent, it bowed, and in its place, something more dangerous bloomed. After, they lay in the dim quiet. His hand rested on the curve of her hip. Her body hummed from every place he touched. Her chest rose and fell slowly. She stared at the ceiling, one thought echoing louder than the rest. I broke my own heart walking back in here. The city was still asleep when Fatou woke. She lay on her side facing the window, the pale blue light of morning washing across her skin like a soft confession. Her breath came slow, controlled, but her heart, it beat like it remembered something her body hadn't caught up to yet. Tunde's arm was draped across her waist, heavy and warm, possessive. She could feel his breath at the nape of her neck, steady and full of sleep. His chest rose and fell behind her like nothing had happened, like they hadn't broken every boundary she'd worked months to build. She peeled his arm off of her gently, sat up slowly. Her body ached in familiar places, but it wasn't pleasure she felt. It was the echo of intimacy, the ghost of safety, and beneath that, a hum of something colder, something cruel. She glanced at the clock, 6:12 a.m. Careful not to make a sound, she stood and padded across the wooden floor, retrieving her robe and underwear like stolen things. Her fingers shook as she pulled them on. Her reflection caught in the full-length mirror near his dresser. She looked raw, real, unforgiving. In the mirror, she saw Tunde stir behind her, eyes barely open, lips parted in the slow, smug curl that used to mean, "Don't leave yet." "You're really gonna sneak out?" he murmured. His voice was rough with sleep, but there was a knowing in it, a satisfaction. She didn't answer, not right away. She turned around slowly, arms crossed. Her voice came low and clear. "Don't smile like you won." Tunde sat up, the sheet falling from his torso. The golden morning light danced across his copper-brown skin, casting shadows over the hard lines of his chest. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes wide awake now. "Didn't I?" The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Fatou stepped back, suddenly needing space. The illusion had cracked, and what poured through the gap was every reason she'd ever had to hate him. "You don't get to weaponize my weakness," she said. He stood. "You showed up at my door, Fatou." The tension snapped. She hated how easily he made everything sound like her fault, like she was a moth, and he was just the flame doing what flames do, burn. "You begged me with your eyes," he said, "the second you saw me." She didn't flinch. She stepped forward, closer than she should have, and looked him dead in the eye. "Don't confuse my ache with surrender, and don't confuse your ego with power," he shot back. They stood there, inches apart, breaths shallow, hearts roaring. Two people with history tattooed into their skin. Two people who couldn't stop bleeding into each other. Finally, she reached for her coat, slid her phone into the pocket. "This was a mistake," she said, stepping into the hallway light. "You say that every time," he replied, his voice trailing after her like smoke. Fatou stood by the door, her hand on the knob, but something in her wouldn't let her open it just yet. She could feel him watching her, shirtless, his body still humming with the night they'd just burned through. The air between them was thick with heat and history, and a question she'd tried not to ask, tried to push aside, tried to tell herself it didn't matter, but it did. She turned slowly, her back pressed to the door. "Was it just once?" she asked, voice soft but serrated. "What?" Tunde replied, but he knew. Of course he knew. She lifted her chin, her eyes searching his. You and Kofi. Her words dropped like stones. Was that a one-time thing? Or are you into men? Tunde blinked, caught between reflex and revelation. His jaw flexed. For a moment, he looked like a boy cornered by truth, like a man who wasn't ready for the mirror she held up to him. He exhaled through his nose. Does it matter? He asked. It does now, she said, because I need to know if what I walked in on was a betrayal or a whole damn performance. He stepped forward slowly. Fatou, what happened with Kofi wasn't some calculated... She cut him off. Don't give me sanitized words, Tunde. I saw you. That wasn't confusion. That was comfort. He paused, jaw clenched, shoulders rising and falling with a breath that felt too late. It wasn't the first time, he said finally. Silence stretched. And it probably won't be the last. There it was. She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat sharp and dry. He stepped even closer. But I didn't lie to you, Fatou. I lied to myself for years, because this world doesn't make space for men like me to be more than one thing at a time. Her eyes glossed. You could have told me, she whispered. I wasn't ready to tell myself, he whispered back. It hurt. How much sense that made. How human it sounded. She looked at him, not with rage now, but with something heavier, the weight of knowing someone you once loved is still hiding in plain sight, even from themselves. She turned the doorknob. I hope you find the courage to live fully, she said. I hope you find the courage to forgive, he replied, and this time she didn't stop walking. There are silences that echo louder than shouting. This was one of them. The door shut behind her with a click that felt like a pin pulled from a grenade. She didn't look back, not even once. Her spine stayed straight, her pace steady. But inside, her insides were unraveling. By the time she reached the elevator, her hands were shaking. She pressed the button once, twice, harder, as if it could erase the last 12 hours, as if her body didn't still remember him, his breath on her skin, the way his voice cracked when he said her name, the way he touched her like someone who didn't deserve the grace but was grateful for it anyway. She should not have came, but there was something about the way he looked when he opened the door, or maybe it was just the girl who still remembered how he looked at her the first night he kissed her collarbone. But whatever it was, it made her stay. The elevator doors opened and Fatou stepped in, alone. As they slid closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panel. Hair slightly frizzed, eyes swollen, lips bruised from too many truths spoken between kisses. When the elevator opened to the lobby, she took a deep breath, slow and jagged, and walked out into the golden morning like she hadn't just broken her own heart again. Her phone buzzed as she reached the curb. A message from Tunde. I didn't plan for you to come. I also didn't plan to feel like this after you left. She didn't reply. Not yet. Not until she figured out what she was feeling, because the truth was, she wasn't sure if it was rage or relapse. And somewhere between those two, danger lived. The silence of her apartment greeted her like a familiar ache. No shoes kicked off, no music played. She walked in, locked the door, and dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the entryway like muscle memory. The echo it made was louder than expected, like something had cracked inside her walls. Her coat came off next, flung across the back of the couch with a single tired motion. Her bag landed next to it, slouched and defeated. She moved like she'd been holding her breath all day. Her chest rose and fell with the kind of stillness that doesn't belong to peace, but to someone trying to keep their soul from leaking out. She made it to the bedroom in a daze. The mirror above her dresser stared back at her like it knew everything. Her reflection looked older, not broken, but different. Her face was bare, cheeks slightly flushed from the wind and something deeper. Her collarbone peeked through the neckline of her robe, like the truth trying to escape. She didn't move at first. Then her hand rose slowly, up to her neck. Her fingers brushed the exact place where he had kissed her. A breath caught in her throat, not because of the tenderness, but because of the weight. That kiss hadn't asked for permission, and she hadn't stopped it. She pressed her palm there. Her skin was still warm. The silence deepened, and then, as if pulled from some grave inside herself, she whispered, "You said if he came near you again, you'd erase him. Now look at you." Her voice was low, almost like a secret. Her eyes didn't blink. They just stared at herself, through herself. She looked for guilt, for shame, for softness, for rage. But all she saw was a woman haunted by her own lack of certainty. Her chest rose, her lips trembled. The candle flickered behind her. A wind passed through the cracked window. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's dog barked. But inside her apartment and inside her chest was silence, except for the scream she never let out. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give him that. But as she turned away from the mirror, the message she sent herself, on repeat, followed her like a shadow down the hall. Never again. The next morning, the sunlight came in crooked, slanting through the blinds like golden judgment. It fell across Fatou's bed, warming the sheets that still remembered her twisting in the night. She hadn't slept. Not really. Not when her mind kept playing the memory of his breath against her collarbone like a song stuck on loop. She got up slowly. No music, no phone, no distractions. The weight of the night before clung to her like smoke. She brewed her tea in silence. The kettle hissed. The spoon tapped against the rim of her cup like a countdown. The ginger scent filled the kitchen, warm and grounding, but it didn't touch the cold in her chest. As she sat at the kitchen table, she scrolled. Not through texts, not through memories, through his page. Tunde hadn't posted in a while, but he decided to post today. Just one photo, a selfie from the cafe where she had met up with him, drink in hand, captioned with something vague. "Peace is expensive. I stopped buying it." He looked good, and he knew it, but he didn't know she had watched his eyes, how they flickered every time she got too quiet. He didn't know she had kissed him that night, not because she wanted to fall again, but because she needed to remember if it ever really felt safe. It didn't, and still she let herself lean in, just enough, just long enough. Because the real danger isn't the man who thinks he's won, it's the woman who stopped guarding him from the price of his victory. Fatou placed her phone face down. He doesn't get to end this. The words weren't loud, they didn't have to be, because this time the threat wasn't in the volume. It was in the smile curling slowly at the edge of her lips. But then an email came. At 3:47 a.m. No subject line, no sender name she recognized, just a simple message sitting in her inbox like it belonged there, like it had been waiting for her to wake up and find it. Attached, a single video file, no name, no caption. She didn't need to click play to know what it was. She stared at it for a long time, her heart still, like her body was waiting for instructions from somewhere deeper than her chest. When she finally clicked it open, the video bloomed full screen. It was the night of her return, dim lighting, familiar angles. At first it was his voice. "You came." Then hers, low, shaky, controlled. "This means nothing." Then, "You don't get to pretend this is sacred." Then something else. Soft, muffled, rhythmic. The creak of the floorboards, the rustle of cotton bed sheets, the quiet, involuntary sounds of her own body surrendering to something she never meant to relive. Her breathing, his voice. She froze. She hadn't recorded this. He had recorded it. The screen trembled in her hand as nausea curled in her stomach. This wasn't a memory. It was a weapon. A time-stamped betrayal hiding behind soft light and low tones. He had recorded her, all of her, without consent, without mercy, and now he was showing her just enough to make the threat clear. No demands, no blackmail, just a mirror held up to her grief, her rage, her vulnerability, recorded, catalogued, and sent like a whisper against her throat. She didn't sleep after that. She sat in the dark, phone in hand, laptop open but untouched. Her tea went cold again. The candle flickered down to a stub. The clock hands moved, but she didn't, because she knew what this was. It wasn't war, not yet. It was a warning. And in the silence, Fatou did something she hadn't done in months. She smiled, not because she was afraid, but because he had blinked first. And that meant she was finally holding something that scared him back. The next morning the sun rose like nothing had happened, but something had shifted, subtly, quietly. Like gravity had tilted 2 degrees and no one felt it but her. Fatou sat at her kitchen counter, barefoot, wrapped in the long cream robe she'd had since university. Her tea steamed in its cup, fresh this time. She wasn't trembling. Her hands were still, her face unreadable. The only hint of motion was the slow circling of her thumb over the rim of the mug. She'd listened to the audio twice, once in anger, the second time in clarity. She hadn't deleted it. Instead, she downloaded it, renamed it Reckoning, and dropped it into an encrypted drive. Not as a trophy, not even as leverage, but as a reminder. The man who had once begged to protect her had now weaponized her silence, and that meant the rules had changed. By noon, she had cleared her calendar. By 3 p.m., she had taken the metro across town in black shades, sneakers, and a jacket that fell past her hips. She didn't call. She didn't text. She knocked. Tunde opened the door like he'd been expecting her. "Fatou," he said, like a greeting and a sigh. "You came." She stepped inside without permission. He closed the door behind her, slow and deliberate. She felt his gaze sweep her back, her profile, the way her jaw was set like iron. She didn't sit, she didn't speak. She took in the room. How neat it was now. No scattered mugs, no wine bottle, no evidence of what had happened the last time she'd been here. He'd scrubbed it clean. A performance. "You sent it to scare me," she said finally, voice low, level. "But you showed your hand." He leaned against the edge of the couch, arms folded. "Or maybe I wanted you to know I still have access." She met his eyes, really met them, and for a second Tunde's smirk faltered. "That's the difference between us," she whispered. "You keep receipts because you're scared of losing control. I keep silence because I already survived losing it." The room went quiet, thick with something unnameable. And then, before either of them could choose a different ending, he stepped toward her. She didn't move. She didn't flinch, but she wasn't going to fall again. Not this time, not so easily. Unless she wanted him to think she had. Because maybe the real game now wasn't about resisting. Maybe it was about watching him disarm himself completely, one weak moment at a time. Tunde poured her a drink. He hadn't asked, just slid the glass across the table with that same measured calm he always wore when he was trying to hide the fire behind his eyes. Fatou moved it away slightly. She didn't need the courage. She had already come in with it. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was purposeful, dense, like waiting for a storm to hit, but refusing to close the windows. "You haven't changed much," he finally said, his voice smooth, too casual. "Still know how to fill a room." She tilted her head. "And you're still trying to read people like scripts, still assuming you're the one holding the pen." That made him pause, but only for a moment. "You came here again," he said, stepping closer, "which means something." "It means," she replied softly, "I needed to see for myself that your power was just performance." His jaw clenched, but his eyes, they flickered with something else. Fear, fascination, both? He said nothing. I realized. She turned to face him. "You don't love revenge. You need it, like a fix. Like it's the only way you know how to feel close to anything. Tunde exhaled slow. Well, that's rich coming from the woman who set a whole life on fire. Fatou stepped forward. Close, too close. She was close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the pulse in his neck, the way his fingers twitched like they wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. She leaned in, just enough to make him listen with his breath. I didn't come to fight, she whispered. I came to make peace with the part of me that ever believed you were capable of love. And then, because she wanted him to doubt everything, she reached up, touched his face softly, gently, a ghost of a caress across his jawline. Her thumb brushed just beneath his eye. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her like she'd cracked something wide open. And then, just as he leaned forward, she stepped back. Don't mistake access for intimacy, Tunde, she said. You're not the prize, you're the lesson. And walked out with his silence chasing her. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, Tunde exhaled. But not in anger, not even in disappointment. He smiled. It was slight, barely there. Not joy, not victory, satisfaction. She thought she'd won something. He stepped toward the untouched glass on the table, the one he poured for her, the one that still carried the faint outline of her fingertips from when she pushed it back, ever so slightly. He picked it up, swirling the amber liquid slowly, thoughtfully. She came back, he whispered to himself. He took a slow sip, then reached for the small remote on the coffee table and hit play. A barely audible beep, tiny, discreet, and then her voice filled the room, distorted by distance but clear enough. I needed to see for myself that your power was just performance. Then, you're not the prize, you're the lesson. He let the recording loop once, then once more, then stopped it, not to delete it, to keep it. Tunde had been quiet these last 3 months, but not idle. He'd studied her silences, watched what she didn't post, tracked the way she moved like someone healing, someone trying to rewrite the narrative. He wasn't angry she'd walked in tonight. He'd expected it, he'd engineered it, the text that went unanswered, the DM deleted before read, the friend she didn't realize was mutual, the email anonymously forwarded to her inbox, the whisper trail he laid like breadcrumbs to lure her to his door. Fatou thought she had cornered him, but Tunde had never stopped playing chess. He moved to the bookshelf beside the window and pulled a thin file tucked between 2 books. Inside were photos, screenshots. Tunde wasn't just back in the game, he'd never left, and now he had her exactly where he wanted her. The game was never over. It was just quiet while he reset the trap. I hope this story reminds you that some wounds don't bleed. They bruise in silence. They change how you walk, how you speak, how you trust. Fatou's story is not just about betrayal. It's about boundaries, about healing, about learning when to close the door and when to deadbolt it. But healing doesn't follow a straight line. It loops, stumbles, and circles back when you least expect it. You think you're fine until a memory presses in softly, exactly where it still hurts, and suddenly all that strength feels borrowed. The lesson? Know the difference between what hurt you and what's still haunting you.